While we didn't see a 2022.4 in April, we now have a 2022.5, and with it comes some cool stuff, and one particular interesting feature called time sources. Time sources are fundamentally alarms 2.0. Alarms could only run linked directly to the frame rate, and they were awkward to manage as separate events. They were limited in number because they were tied to events, and were difficult to pause or manipulate. A time source is fundamentally the same thing as an alarm, but with all those problems fixed. You define them in GML code, you can give them a duration in frames or seconds independent of the frame rate, you tie it to a parent time source which you can pause in order to pause all of your game time sources, but you can put them outside of this as well. You give it a function to call when the timer expires that you can define directly as you create the time source. You can pass a full array of arguments to this function, and you can set the time source to loop a fixed number of times or indefinitely, and then once you define that time source, you can start it, stop it, reconfigure it whenever you want, as often as you want. This is an awesome new feature, and for me fixes every issue I ever had with alarms as someone who loved using them in the past to do things quickly, but would very rarely use them in a production project. These I can really use and manage. I made a super short 1.5 minute video explaining how it works, so check that out if you're interested. The IDE has been upgraded from .NET 4.5 to .NET 6, which means not a lot to me, or to the end user in general, but was probably important. Time will tell if there has been stability and performance improvements as claimed, but it is clear this was an upgrade to the foundation of GameMaker. And it would be nice to not have to wonder what's going on with these weird extra drive letters GameMaker used to create on the fly while you were working. This probably took quite a bit of time, but was necessary for GameMaker to have the framework it needs going forwards. You can now add pre-create values on an instance. This is pretty cool, so when using instance create layer or depth, you can now assign variables to that instance before running the create event. Until now, the only thing we could do prior to the create event was assign variables via the object or instance variables menu in the object or room editor. Now, since we can do this dynamically, the most obvious use case is being able to set a flag like the type example they've used in the blog post. Then you can react to that value in your object create event. Now this last thing is rather advanced, but they also mention it's possible to use a constructor to pass across a struct of values and possibly functions to an otherwise empty object. This, combined with using time sources to create your own pseudo step event within the constructor, means that if you can find a way to define your own events, you can, if you want to, completely eschew using any GameMaker objects in your game at all, if you really want to. Find all references is in beta along with Feather still. Although they have said that they want to bring Feather to stable for next month's release, so I'm really looking forward to that. Find all references is like a smart version of the global search and replace you can access with Ctrl-Shift-F. By hovering over a variable and pressing F3, we can step through all of the places that variable has been used. If you press Shift F3, you can get them all presented as a list, similar to doing a global search. However, Feather is able to track these variables with context. It knows where the specific variable came from and which events, objects, and scripts are referencing it. So if you have other local variables in other objects with the same name, those won't be confused for the variable you're looking for. Pretty cool stuff. Sound resources can now be inspected in the inspector and now show waveforms you can use to find the exact time value of certain peaks and moments in the sound. Pretty handy, the inspector just keeps on growing. There's a new blowing leaves effect. This is actually a bit different in that it marks the first effect brought to the effects and filters layers. That means it actually has GML code managing it and is a bit more complex than a simple filter. It has a lot of settings. Because this is a coded effect, however, you can't preview it in the room editor. It's a cool effect, but in my opinion probably a little tricky to use if you have to recompile every time and there's so many different settings you can't visually adjust easily. Still, kinda cool though. That's it for the highlights of 2022.5. As always, there are more changes and bug fixes in the release notes that you ought to go and check out yourself. Thanks for watching, and thank you as always to my patrons for supporting my content. Cheers guys, and I'll catch you all next time.